so, and they came around to remove it. It was a Just Be Kind sign. I feel like I understand the reason behind having sign ordinances is to keep your town attractive, clean, neat, but removing a Just Be Kind sign from in front of somebody's home and their landscaping of a piece of property that the homeowner themselves maintains. Now, I understand that it's not technically owned by the homeowner. In my situation, there is no homeowners association. The property rights and everything that is in our legal for our home does not describe who is supposed to take care of that property, because those are void because things weren't done right in the town in the first place. So what I feel is that I believe that we should be allowed to place signs on a piece of property that we maintain. And that's what I'm asking you guys to approve. Any questions for me?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
When you said it was attempted to be removed?
Yes, I happened to be standing in my driveway when they came around to remove it, and I took it before they did.
Was it street department?
It was.
Our current UDO says it's that the legislative body or their designee can authorize a sign to be. Did you ever approach them about that?
No.
Okay.
Like I said, it had been in my landscaping for a year. I hadn't thought much of it. People have flags that they put there. They have lights that they put there, other decorations. And, I don't see a huge difference between a Just Be Kind sign and a flag that says Just Be Kind.
Did you put the sign back out on your property anywhere?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all right.
Yes, I did.
It hasn't been disturbed since that time?
No, it has not. And it's currently in front of my business as well. So it's kind of part of my business, my persona in the town. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Are you the one that started the Just Be Kind signs?
I am not, no, but I did bring a lot of attention to them here in Mooresville because of, I own Chunky Monkey Ice Cream, and we have the Just Be Kind signs and the food pantry that says Just Be Kind in front of our business. So, any other questions?
Anybody else, questions?
All right, thank you guys.
Anyone else?
Hello. My name is Chris Galt. I live in Mooresville. Very similar to Jessica's situation. A sign was also taken in the easement of my home by the street department. Unfortunately, I was not home, so I just went home and it was gone.
What was the sign?
It was a political sign. And the political sign was there. I got home, it was gone. I had no idea what happened, except for that it apparently happened to a lot of other people the same day, and it was on Facebook, and that's how I figured out what happened. I was able to get the sign back, so that was good. It wasn't destroyed, but I maintain the land in front of the yard. Just like her, I don't have a homeowners association or anything. I think that citizens should be allowed to have their signs in their easement. So I'd ask you to support moving or amending that to allow people to put signs there. I think it's for freedom of speech. Especially even during like election times, I think you guys should maybe even considering allowing signs in the town. I think it shows it's a way for people to express themselves and show support for people they believe in for the town or for their state. And I think that would be a really good thing for the town, even if it's just the month of the election or the couple weeks before, and then it's like a thing for the town that you see the signs everywhere. I think that'd be pretty neat. But I didn't like that my property was taken from me with no warning. He could have put a sticker on it or left a note and told me to move the sign. I didn't get any warning or anything, so I just wish that would be changed. Thank you.
What's the distance that you would gain if you would from where the sign was to where you had to put it on your property? 3 or 4 feet, you would have to move it back is all?
Oh, I would have only had to move it back like 2 feet. It was very close. It just was close
So,
enough.
you don't think people could see it if it was moved back 2 feet?
Oh, yeah, they can see it. That's where it is now. It's moved back 2 feet. I wasn't given any warning, any notice. I wasn't, they just took it. They took it, they didn't leave a note saying this is how you get your sign back, nothing. It was just gone.
I understand the process probably could have been better to remove the sign. But you did get it back from the street department?
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
Kind of a follow-up on his question.
Yeah.
Did you, you haven't had any trouble with it since it's been on your,
Nope.
since you replaced it? And then did you ever approach the legislative body or their designee about putting it back where it was and ask for their, authorization to do that? Did you ever do that?
Not personally, no.
Okay, I'm just curious.
No,
Right.
I never asked.
Okay, thanks. That's all I wanted to know.
Anything else? Thank you.
Anyone else, please?
Kristen Alexander. Technically, I'm an outsider looking in. I work in Mooresville. My kids have gone to school in Mooresville. I've gone to school in Mooresville, but I live just outside city limits. I think just what the point we're trying to make here today is that we shouldn't have to approach the legislative body to ask to put a sign in the property that they maintain. And I don't know if you've seen or looked over the amendment that's been proposed. The whole point of the amendment that was proposed, that is supposed to be the reason why we're here tonight, is for a hearing on this amendment, is to make the ordinance a little less restrictive, but also to keep the town looking nice and give people back a little bit more of their freedom, so we're not coming to ask daddy every time we want to put a sign somewhere. Political affiliations and parties should be allowed to put their signs out for advertisement. The state says so, and our ordinance here in Mooresville should not be more restrictive than the state's ordinance. That's all I have on the matter.
Wait a minute.
Can I, go ahead.
Answer that.
Okay, I've looked into this quite a bit. I live in Old White Ash Trail also, hot neighbor. And, the Mooresville Code references federal statute, as does the state code and the county code, with regards to signs. In the federal statute 23, we can get into the sections and numbers, but
Right.
it talks about the placement of signs, and the codes are predicated on public safety, things that obscure vision.
And I think that if you look at the amendment that's being proposed, we're not asking for these giant signs. Small yard signs are not a distraction or an obstruction of vision in your line of sight, especially with the way most people are driving trucks. It's not like we're out here on cars that are 2 feet from the ground where these signs are. These signs aren't more than 3 feet tall, and it's kind of a little overbearing to make us go ask every time we want to put a sign in the part of our yards that we maintain. I'm not asking the street department to come mow my yard, so the street department should not be allowed to come remove a sign from my yard, especially when it's been there less than 60 days and it's well within a size.
If I may finish, the amendment, as is presented, opens up areas that are adjacent to traffic right-of-ways. It talks about landscaped areas being excluded, but it says it does not include areas that are mowed. If we look at the state statute and the county statute, rights-of-way around streets and roadways, there are distances that are outlined to keep the unfettered placement of signs because of obstruction to views. Yeah, I know personally I don't worry so much about the little strip of grass between your sidewalk and your curb.
Right.
But as you get down to the nearest intersection from your sidewalk and your curb, you have to be careful where you place a sign in that area. If somebody's riding a bicycle down White Ash Trail and you're backing out of your driveway and you look and you see a sign that says, "Keep America Great," and you back over somebody on a bicycle because of that sign, that's the issue of public safety. It can happen. And, you know, with everything being predicated on public safety, the number one thing in all of these regulations, if you read the, trust me, I've read them. And then it gets into beautification, aesthetics, and all of that is second and third. But, you know, looking at public safety is a primary thing. If you look at the federal code, you look at the state code, and the state even has something that specifically talks about campaign signs right there in the front of NDOT. Then you go to the county code, and they even have exemptions in the county code, as long as they stay within or outside of a minimum number of feet from the rights-of-way. It comes down to public safety being the issue, not trying to impose.
I completely understand that. So then why is there you can go ask permission, and then you can put as big of a sign up as you want, as long as you have permission? That's not safety. That has nothing to do with safety.
That's all
That
they're
has to
saying.
do with picking and choosing winners. And that has to do with, it's not fair across the board, and that's not okay. And that's all that the public is trying to change. We aren't trying to change the meat and potatoes. We want the safety. We want the beautification. We understand all of that. But it becomes a slippery slope when you have to go ask your government for permission to do something as simple as put out a sign in your front yard. Thank you.
But anyhow, referencing rights-of-way, specified distances from traffic-ways, asking permission to do that, it shifts the burden of liability in doing that a little bit. So, you know, and all of the statutes also have the disclaimer that, you know, signs can be placed if permission is given. And
So
you-
then, are we to understand that Mooresville will see no political signs whatsoever in
I
the
have
next
no
cycle?
idea. I have no idea. I have no idea how many people asked permission to put signs out. I don't
Who
know.
cares if all three political parties ask?
I don't know.
And so who do we need to ask then in May come primary time? Because I want to get it right this year.
It's the street department.
We have to go to the street department at a street department meeting?
Aren't they the designee?
Dave Moore.
They'd be the designee
I
of
believe
the
it's
council.
also the town.
The town council.
So
and
we
their
do
thing.
need to ask the town council. I want that on the record.
I'm pretty sure you could come to the town council.
The
and
town
ask.
council is named Dave Moore as the designee.
They.
So we go to the town council and then Dave makes the decision?
And I'm sure they're going to want to know the location, the size of the sign, and how many signs you plan to put out, and based on that,
Okay.
I'm assuming,
Okay.
I'm making an assumption.
Well, no, I
that-
completely
that-
understand. I
but
just want to
but I
know,
also
since
think
we're not
that-
going to pass this
It's a
amendment.
The little grassy area in front of your side,
Questioning the town council, if our attorney were here, she would probably cut you off,
Yeah.
saying that asking the town council, or asking the planning commission, what is right and good for you as a citizen to do, that you need to research this yourself.
Got it.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can I ask you a real quick question? You said your children go to Mooresville schools, and that you work in Mooresville.
I have worked in Mooresville most of my life, yeah.
But you currently don't live in Mooresville?
No.
But you live in a surrounding area?
Just outside of Mooresville, yes. Literally like 1/2 mile from the line.
Right, but you live in the county then?
Correct.
But outside of the town? Okay.
Correct.
So have you approached the county about putting a sign in your yard?
No, my yard's fine. I am worried about putting signs around for campaigns that I work on and work with. I want to know what my rights are in order to support my candidates next year.
But you weren't planning on putting a sign in your yard?
My yard doesn't have a sign ordinance.
Well, the county does, and that's why I just didn't know if you'd approached the county about asking them about. I just was curious.
No, the
because they
county
would
hasn't
make-
come and stolen my signs out of my yard before. And I've been doing it for years, and they've never said anything to me. I'm sure that they're far enough back behind the guardrails, so.
Well, if they're on your property, then of course you always could put a sign on your
I
property
understand
in town
that.
too.
I'm
I
just trying to support my candidates in the
Sure.
future, and I want to know what, where, and how I can support them. That's my focus on asking these questions.
Okay. I just didn't know if you'd approached the county about your particular property.
No, but I will be, so thank you.
All right, no problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? Pardon? Please.
Yeah, let me get up here.
Yeah.
Just to address some of the things, at least from our point of view and things that we've seen. And we talk about safety, we totally understand, that's why there's a size limit in there, that it's a small yard sign, what we would call a yard sign, it can't be huge. However, in one of the areas that is being disputed, the town council has approved a giant letter sign that you pull behind a truck, and they parked it there. So it's clearly not a safety issue, no other signs are allowed to be there. But the fact that you haven't asked permission to begin with, Indiana state law also says you can't discriminate based on content, and yet they have. Other people have been told it's fine to put out a giant sign there, but political parties can't put out a small sign. We were the only ones that have been denied. They've allowed everyone else. We were the only ones told no.
Who's everyone else?
Well, according to FOI requests, there's been a sorority 5K, the Parks Department, and, I mean, do you guys remember seeing the Mooresville Christmas Light Show signs? They actually didn't have permission, but their signs were out for a few months. That was fine. Nobody bothered with that. No defamatory comments were made about them. There's a sign right outside this front door, right on the curb. I'm guessing it didn't cause any safety issues as you guys pulled in, but it's been there for more than a month.
What is it?
So it's not being universally enforced, is my point. It's only being enforced on signs they don't like. And that's a problem.
Well, I think the council needs to know that, and that it would take the...
We've been complaining for a year, but we think this helps fix that, because you don't have selective enforcement unless you have abandoned sign issues. It removes the ask permission requirement. Either everybody has permission or nobody does. That's what it should say if you can't discriminate on content. It limits it based on size, which is within the state law. So that's my argument. And I'll go sit down. Sure.
You said, and I'm just going off of what you said, that you said there was a large sign that was in public right-of-way. And that sounds like it's bigger than what is in this proposed grouping. So that would still be an issue compared to what's in this.
That's right. They would still have to get special permission for that.
Okay.
And that, because it might be a safety issue if they were to park it someplace else, right? I agree that there it's probably not a safety issue, but it is a much larger sign than what we're asking for.
But whether it's a large sign or a small sign, there are still sign requirements that it can't be offensive, it can't be some of these other things. Even if it's on private property, that it can be a distraction or a nuisance in some way, that you kind of have to come and ask for a permit and permission and those sorts of things in order to put it out there for a period of time. I mean, our sign ordinance is pretty detailed in how it handles things like that, because we want consistency and uniformity.
And you know, when I asked people who wrote it and voted for it, they said it was never intended to apply to small yard signs, but it doesn't specifically exclude them, right? So it's being theoretically, according to what I've been told, misapplied. And this amendment would fix that.
Have you looked at the state and county sign ordinances, and have you approached them about making changes to their ordinance?
They don't enforce it the same way Mooresville does, which is discriminately.
But it's still is similar to what we have in this, is that right?
I have never seen them take down signs the way that Mooresville does. And when they start doing that, we will make it an issue.
Do you know if they're allowed to have signs in the public right-of-way for the state or for the county?
I can tell you, driving around Morgan County, they're everywhere, and I've never once heard anybody say they've had a sign taken down.
But you haven't looked at the ordinance to see if it is any different than...
I've not gone through the county ordinance with a fine-tooth comb, no.
I've gone through the county ordinance, and it's prohibited, but I was in Martinsville last night, and they're everywhere.
Right.
So, I mean, enforcement needs to be uniform. So I agree.
And my other argument to that would be, if you're trying to enforce it in front of everyone's yard, between the sidewalk and the street, all over town, if your goal is to lock down the town, then we have to hire the sign police. And that's a waste of money, right?
We know that.
Right, and that would be a huge waste of money, because that's literally all they do is drive around town taking signs out of people's yards, and that sounds crazy.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
If I may. Is it my ask a question?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah. The grass area between the sidewalk and the curb.
Right.
In the residential areas, I'm not talking business, I'm talking
Sure.
residential. Is that the biggest area of consideration and concern?
So that is one of my biggest concerns, yeah.
You know,
That and the ask permission, those are the two biggest
I'm
issues
not
I have.
talking medians, I'm
Sure.
not talking along a public roadway, I'm
I agree.
talking in front of her yard where she had her house, and over in the house where they got the little sign, pick up your dog
Yeah.
droppings, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and slow children at play signs, things like that, which you do want next to the
If that's-
street,
If
right?
that's the primary consideration, then would you consider an amendment that addresses just that area? And not everything so carte blanche on everything?
Sure. I would consider it, and I'd be happy to discuss it. My other big concern, like I said, is the ask permission requirement, because that leads to, by definition, some people are going to get told yes, some people are going to get told no, and that's discriminatory.
And I'm just referring to
Right.
the area.
I know what you're
in
talking
front of the
about,
home.
and I know there's a section in the amendment that addresses that specifically.
Yeah, so-
And that is one of the major concerns. Like I said, the other one that concerns us is the ask permission requirement. Those are the two big things.
I think there needs to be uniform enforcement, I agree with you there. But I also believe in consensus sometimes,
Sure.
and trying to come up with something that everyone can live with.
And that's what we're trying to do here, right? Because I think the intent when they wrote this was, hey, we have signs sometimes that are left forever. They look like trash. They've been there a long time. They don't look good. And that's why there's like a 90-day requirement. Hey, if it's been there for a long time, it's been abandoned, the town should have a reason and the ability to go clean that up. And I agree with that. And it's why we also put something in like, hey, we don't want people staking signs in flower beds. That's not okay either. That doesn't look good. We want people to be responsible. If they're going to put out signs, they need to be super responsible about it. And that's part of it. But you can't just pick and choose the way they've been doing, that this guy can't have signs, that guy can. Oh, we're going to tell political parties they can't have signs, but we're just going to ignore those few candidates because we like them. That's what's been happening, and that's not right.
So if I can ask you a couple more questions. So you've not experienced a problem with the state right-of-way, which we have in town,
Right.
or the county right-of-way, which is close to town.
Sure.
But which our current ordinance is very consistent with what those say in that regard. Sounds like your biggest concern is the enforcement inconsistency, you might say,
Yep.
that you're seeing in town versus what you're seeing in those other entities. Because I heard you say you're not seeing issues with enforcement in the other areas that cause you concern.
Right, that's correct. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, since our current ordinance is consistent with what's going on in those other areas, do you think it would be advisable for us to approach the county and the state to address all the questions that you just had regarding consistency of enforcement? Why are you as a citizen experiencing a problem in town and not in those other areas? And maybe we could, inquire with them, what do they do about the things you're talking about? Signs that look like they're abandoned, signs that are inappropriate, signs that are falling apart or in disrepair. What do they do about it? And that would help us guide the town in enforcement.
Could be. And I think, David brought it up. If it's a safety issue, they take it down. And I think honestly, that's all they worry about, because otherwise they'd have to have the sign police. And they clearly don't do that, because you drive up and down 67, there's signs all over that too. But if it gets in people's way, if you can't see, that's a problem, they'll come take it down. Right?
And there are other areas like utility poles and things like that where there are restrictions on signs being placed on there because of other reasons. So I just want to clearly understand what your concerns were.
Yep, that's it. Anything else? Yep.
Stay there.
All right.
We're gonna go through this, and that won't take long.
All right, yeah, it's not
Okay.
very long.
Does everybody have their copy? Do you have a copy?
I've read it a few times, yeah.
I'm gonna give you a copy.
All right.
You got a copy that you can have?
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Okay. Okay, the first page. Current language, see where that starts?
Mhm.
Signs may not be installed at any of the following locations in any public right-of-way unless specifically authorized by the legislative body or their designee. What has been requested here, the amendment to that is, signs may not be installed at any of the following locations in any public right-of-way unless specifically permitted in the UDO or an ILP, which is,
Which is a permit.
yes. And some other added language there, signs may not be installed at any of the following locations in any public owned or maintained landscape feature. As I'm reading this, if there's any comments, please stop me now.
Sure.
And we'll discuss each of these. Chapter 3 of the UDO shall be amended to add the following provisions. The following devices are not considered to be signs, do not require an ILP, are specifically exempt from these regulations, and their respective limitations include yard signs. Yard signs are exempt provided they are erected no longer 90 days. Now that throws a red flag up.
Why is that?
Who's going to monitor that? Who's going to police that? Who's going to keep track of that 90 days?
Currently, we're already trying to keep track of every sign in town. I figured that's a little less restrictive. Most of the signs that go up around town, especially in any kind of public area, it has dates on it. It's either some kind of garage sale, it's a summer concert, it's a seasonal sign, like the Christmas light signs. Once they're past their usefulness, it's time to call somebody and say, hey, you forgot to come get your sign. And I don't think Dave's guys should have to unless it's truly abandoned. You know, please make a phone call, make them go clean up their own mess. They know where they put the signs, right?
So you don't, I mean, at this time, you don't have an idea as to how we would monitor that 90 days?
Other than, yeah, it's seasonal. 90 days is pretty seasonal. It's a summer concert, summer's over, time to pick up that sign, right?
It could be.
Right.
The other are placed in a right-of-way adjacent to private property that is maintained with the property owner or tenant and placed with permission of that owner or tenant, or are placed by a unit of government within the boundaries of property governed by that unit. And that would cover the signs like the parks got.
Yeah, parks can put in signs at the parks. The police station, which is technically government property, has huge banners down there all the time. I don't know if they ask permission.
But, go ahead.
No, that's it. The way it's currently written, theoretically, the police department would have to ask permission to put signs on their own lawn, right?
So
This would allow them to treat that as their own property.
the way this is written is that piece of property we're talking about, the strip next to the sidewalk or in that area, is what I think is being referred to here, and that would be able to be used with the permission of the property owner or tenant.
Right.
Or placed by a unit of government. So if the, let's say
Within
that,
the boundaries of the property governed by that unit. So like the police department can put a sign on the police department property. The fire department can put a sign out in front of the fire department. Because the parks department came and had to ask permission from the town council, and that seemed absurd, right?
But I think the ruling at that town council, I was at that one.
Yeah, sure.
The ruling was, since it was town property, the town could put a sign on its own property.
Okay. I mean, maybe that one's not needed. I mean, I don't know. I wish Dustin was here. Maybe he could comment on it as well, but.
you live in town, is that
Sure,
correct?
yeah. I live right down the street.
And so you have this situation in your case where there's a strip of piece of property next to your property that is public right of way.
Right.
And, but, so the way this is written, the town could come and put a sign in that piece of property that's in the public right of way with or without your permission.
Is that within the
Because that's
boundaries
what-
of the property
because it says
governed by
or.
that unit?
It's their property, it's their right of way.
Is
They
it an
allow you
easement
to
or is it their
maintain-
property? Like, do they have a right of use or do they own it? That's my question.
They own it.
They own it. It's theirs.
You're saying this would allow them to
They
put a
allow
sign on
you
my
to-
yard?
They allow you to maintain it.
Wouldn't that conflict with Part B?
I think they could put a stop sign there. They could
For
put
sure.
a-
Well, they can do that now, all right.
But I would,
They currently have a construction sign in my yard.
I'll say, you would not have a problem if they put a sign in there that you didn't want in there, but since it's their property, they can, the way this is written.
Well, yeah. And so Part B is to address the part between the sidewalk and the road, right?
But that would be, I think your intent here is that somebody who's advertising a yard sale, or it is a private sign, you might say,
Right.
somebody wants to put it out there for a temporary period of time, and as long as you don't have a problem with it being in front of your property,
Right, as long as they ask
you
me
and a
permission,
private
that'd be fine,
homeowner
yeah.
allow that to happen.
Right.
I'm just wondering why
So you're
that's-
wondering if
why
the
that
Part C
permission-
could be abused by like, the Parks Department want to put out a sign for a concert in my yard?
Sure. I mean, what if they came in, because they can.
Well, sure.
You see this happening on High Street right over here.
Yeah.
If you had a landscaping and all that stuff, that is allowed in there as long as they don't have to get in it, but they don't have to restore it when they come back. They can come in and tear it
Sure.
all out and don't have to put
Yeah,
it
I've
back.
heard all
because
about
it's
the
not-
trees.
Yeah, exactly. The trees and all the other things.
Right.
They are at the, serve the pleasure, you might say, of the
Right.
town. So that same thing, if they came put a sign in, you didn't like it, this would not change that. Is
Well,
that
they can
okay?
do
Is
that
okay
now.
with you?
As my understanding is they can do that now anyway, right?
Right, but the ordinance just enforces that.
And you're right. If that was the ruling at the last one, Part C may not even be needed. If they've already ruled that the police department can put signs on the police department lawn. If they're already saying that that's fine, then that doesn't need to be clarified. But, on the other hand, I believe legal counsel had to go look it up to clarify it, so maybe we should clarify that. I don't know. And maybe it's not worded right, but that's, why it's coming to the planning commission, right? So you guys can
Yeah,
reword it.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
we
no,
understood what
the
you were
intent
asking.
is that the parks can put signs in the parks.
Sure,
And
okay.
that the police department can put, signs in front of the police department, because it would be silly for them to come and ask the town council, can we put out a sign? They maintain that space, that's their space. The department head should be able to do that, right?
Danny, remember this, all we're going to do is make a recommendation to town council.
I understand.
It's their ruling.
Good discussion, though.
Are
a good point.
Are placed by a unit of government within the boundaries of property government. Okay, we've discussed that. The following definition shall be added to Chapter 10. Landscape feature includes, but is not limited to, flower beds, planters, mulch areas, etc. Grassy areas that are mowed regularly are not included in this definition.
Right. Yes.
That opens up all the medians
Sure does.
to signage, and that's where I have a problem with it,
Okay.
comes in public safety. If you eliminate that, the areas that are mowed, then that keeps the medians
Sure.
Yes.
safe.
Right,
Well, I
and-
say safe, that keeps the medians
Clean.
without the encroachment of signs,
right.
supposedly.
Well, and I think, Mr. Elliott from GOP was talking to the town council a couple months ago. He said, and he was speaking specifically about political signs, there's places in town that are out of the way, they're not a safety issue. We've historically put signs there for decades, we're very responsible with them. So the grassy areas kind of takes care of some of those traditional places where people put out concert signs, they put out Christmas light signs, they're used to putting these signs out in those areas. But we wanted to make sure we protected any place where the taxpayers are paying for beautification, like flower beds, mulched areas, where trees are, in the middle of the streets, things like that. I felt like it was important to at least protect those areas. Now, if you want to recommend we strike that, that's whatever, but, right?
Personally, I don't think it would be prudent
Sure,
to open up the medians to signage, because if you look at, again, the federal, state, and county statute, it spells that out specifically.
sure.
And
And one of the nice things is it's also limited by the size, I believe. That it has to be under a certain size in order to fall into this exemption
but
as well,
the
right?
caveat is still there.
Well, sure, but I'm just meaning, that way nobody's putting up a giant banner or something,
That,
right?
that you still, the applicant for permit still may have the opportunity to get a permit, but where I would question, if it's on a county road.
Well, the nice thing about the permitting process, right, is that there's a written request and a written approval or denial.
That's correct.
So you have a record of who's been approved, who's been
Yes.
denied, and why,
But-
which we currently don't have.
Where I
right?
would question was, say, like on 67, which is a state highway. I mean, how far do we have to go to, is it, do we play leapfrog where you do city, county, and state in order to put a sign on a state road, or, I don't know.
But it gets weird, because we've got all the landscaping we did for the Gateway project out there too, right? Like, Mooresville's maintaining that, but then we're not maintaining the other parts of the medians down through there, so you're right, it is weird.
I have no comment.
It is pretty complicated though, especially for regular folks.
But, the grassy areas, that bothers me as far as keeping the median safe. I think
Sure.
if someone issues a permit to do it, then so be it, but.
And I think that's why the ask permission was in there originally, it was meant to be a notification, but unfortunately, it's being used in a discriminatory manner, or it could be. You know, we can argue all day long whether it is or not, but it certainly could be used that way.
So you could support striking that exception of the grassy area?
Yeah, as long as it's universal, and I feel like, you know, that's much easier to enforce, just those handful of areas, rather than everyone's home all over the town, right?
I'll be very candid with you. I just, you know, at a meeting related, I said, if we're going to go ahead and have someone enforcing signs, let's have him be a dog catcher in addition to.
Didn't you just retire from doing that?
What's that?
He said we need a dog catcher too. So didn't you already quit doing that?
That's just my personal aside to that discussion.
Sure, but I mean, again, it's just kind of ridiculous, and I'm just trying to get it fixed.
I usually don't do this, but I want to
Sorry,
give everybody.
I would like to address the median issue as you guys are speaking right now. I don't believe that this was intended to address the medians as a grassy area, because in the Gateway project, that was not intended. The medians in the Gateway project was intended to be landscaped areas, not grassy areas. So I think that is where that confusion comes
No,
in.
I understand that completely.
Yeah.
And I look along 67 and I look along all the others and see signs going everywhere. And I remember when I first moved to town, I mean, it looked like a sign haven out there.
I think that the issue with the signs on 67 is, as you guys had stated, with the county, the town, the county, the state, and who is responsible for maintaining and, permitting those signs on that property
If
as
we
well.
can keep the medians safe, the grassy
And
remote areas.
It's easier to mow if there's not signs out there.
I would also like to address, as far as the sidewalk area, the grassy area between the sidewalk and the road, there is kind of a gray area in parts of Mooresville where that property is an easement owned by the homeowner and granted to the town. So when they take a sign from that, they need to be sure that when they remove that sign, they're not removing it from the homeowner's property, even though the homeowner has granted that easement to the town. And there are several places in this town. I spent many years as a realtor here in Mooresville. I owned several real estate companies at that time. So I am familiar with the limitations of that.
And while that might be easy for Dave to look up, that is not easy for your regular run-of-the-mill
It
homeowner
is
to look
not.
up and know, well, my sign's got to be 5 feet from the road over here, but then my neighbor's only got to be 2 feet away. It's just silly, right? You shouldn't have to get a surveyor out to put a yard sign out
As
there
a
on a garage
homeowner
sale.
in Rooker Trace, you may be aware, I'm not sure, that according to our covenants and restrictions, nobody has to maintain that piece of property, and according to our covenants and restrictions, because a homeowners association was not established at the time that it was supposed to be, and the only one that is allowed per our covenants and restrictions to enforce those covenants and restrictions would have been that homeowners association that was never established. So technically, by law, those covenants and restrictions are void, which means that that piece of property is to be maintained by the town. So I'm just trying to inform you guys that there is a gray area of that grassy property within the town of Mooresville, and we're not asking to put bulletin boards in that property. We're not, I just felt that you can put a flag there, a decorative flag, a pretty flag, or any other type of landscaping without asking permission. But my sign was part of my landscaping and was attempted to be removed. And I think that there needs to be an exception to that in that situation.
And that's why you have to ask and they will grant it.
Well,
Maybe.
Maybe they won't, I don't know.
I live on a cul-de-sac at the dead end of a road where you have to make three left-hand turns in order to get there. And my sign had been there for over a year. My neighbors love my sign. I get compliments on my landscaping and my sign a lot. So it it was during a sweep that they were coming around and removing all the signs. But as Mr. Sadler had stated, there is a please pick up your dog poop sign that is in that property there, of another home in that community. There was a we love our teachers sign that was still in that same location of that property that was not removed. So it is not enforced properly.
Okay, let us move on here.
Okay, sorry.
And thanks for mowing the taxpayers' lawn.
Thank you. Yard sign, any temporary sign that does not exceed 16 square feet in display area and weighs less than 25 pounds. Now, that's gonna be,
What's that?
they're gonna take the sign and weigh it?
Well, so yeah, I figured putting I assume putting a weight limit on it means you can't have like a big metal sign or something, or like an anvil out front, I don't know. But 16 square feet, the way the UDO reads now, that's per surface area, so that's, if it's a two-sided sign, 3x3 would actually be too big.
But the 25 pounds was not the UDO, was it?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, you could have an aluminum sign that's
Sure.
not 25 pounds, that's going to exceed the...
But I know one of the things I wanted to address was the sandwich board signs, that should be addressed, is like the restaurants downtown. They put out a sandwich board, hey, here's today's specials.
Oh, yes.
Should they be able to put those out? I mean, I think they should, but under the current UDO, they can't. That'd be illegal.
But are they putting them out now? Does anybody know?
Some are.
Are they being removed?
No.
Okay. Maybe, do you know that they haven't asked for permission?
According to FOI requests, they have not.
Pardon?
I said, according to my FOI requests, they have not.
Examples of such sign include but are not limited to polyvinyl chloride plastic signage, commonly referred to as yard signs, sandwich board style signs, often used by local businesses, homemade signs often used by individuals to promote private events. All ordinances are part of this ordinance, which is in conflict herein and hereby is repealed. And then it says the ordinance shall become effective in the town council. So what have we accomplished? What have we accomplished?
You may not be aware of this. Within the last couple of years, the school corporation approached us for a new sign to be permanently put in place at Neil Armstrong along 144 on their property. And per our ordinance, they had to come and ask for permission for a new structure.
Of course, that's a big permanent sign.
And they were putting a temporary one out there temporarily, and then they were going to put the permanent one out there on their property along 144. And a resident, because they had to notify people, a resident across the street, their home's across 144 across there, had concerns about the sign location and where it was being placed because the former sign that they were replacing and putting in a different location, they felt like it was a distraction to traffic that is coming up over the hill and down 144, and they were concerned about the safety of exiting their property, which is across the street from where this is, along a state highway, and the distraction, because by definition, a sign, especially a sign that's moving and has things related to it, attracts your attention away from where you're driving. And that was her concern, was that was going to cause a distraction. And we considered that and thought about that and debated that and discussed
Certainly,
that. Same thing with a yard sign or any other sign that's along that right-of-way there. Again, private property is different because it is private property and respecting the private property entity. But anything that is within the driving area of that, be it even 16 square feet, could be something that somebody focuses their attention on reading because it's new and they just saw it come up, because by definition it has to be less than 90 days, and they take their eyes off of the road in a distracted driving concern. Have you thought about that? Is there any concerns that you have about that?
I don't have any major concerns about a small sign. Like you said, a big flashing light sign, sure. Big letter box sign, yeah. I don't think yard signs distract people.
But I guess this ordinance change does not talk about if a person approached the council and said, this sign caused an accident in front of my house, I would like for it to be removed. As a traffic hazard, I don't see where this addresses that.
This doesn't need to, because the UDO already has that as part of their sign ordinance, that any sign deemed unsafe can be removed. Like, that's already a thing. And that applies to all signs, permanent signs, temporary signs, exempted signs, it doesn't matter. That's already a thing you have in your UDO.
So,
So we're not changing that at all.
and again, to kind of summarize when I've been listening to you, regardless of whether we change the UDO or not, I have heard concerns on your part about two things. One is enforcement, being consistent and following a dedicated process. So the process by which something is done, and I heard somebody be, concerns raised about, I wasn't notified, I wasn't told where my sign went, that process.
Sure.
There were concerns about that. And then secondly, what I heard you say is, let me call it inconsistent enforcement, meaning this sign's removed and this sign's not,
Right.
and I don't know why. And so I've heard those, regardless of whether we change the UDO or not, those are concerns that we could make a recommendation to the council about whether or not we change it or not. Those are concerns.
Sure.
This is a public hearing,
Right.
and the goal is to make the process better.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that
Yeah. And
I was hearing you correctly.
No, and that's why I appreciate you guys bringing this up and allowing us a chance to speak and to be heard and to have this conversation. Because this is honestly the first time I feel like we've been heard on this issue in over a year, because nobody's wanted to listen. So thank you for bringing this up. Thank you for scheduling this hearing. Thank you for hearing us. That's important.
So enforcement process and consistency is too big. What else?
And you
Well,
would be,
as far as the ordinance, oh, go ahead.
you would be open to looking at some suggested amendments to the amendment?
Sure. I mean, I'm not the one who proposed it, but yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with it. My two big things was the slice of land next to a property owner's house, because that seems ridiculous to me. That seems like an infringement. And then the asking permission is just begging for some people to be told yes, and some people to be told no on an arbitrary basis, and that's not right.
But would you, even if you had to approach the town for permission, I hear you say more about the consistency of that, saying, I don't know what the process is, it's not written down, there's some other things, key things to that, not so much about the fact that the town needs to be notified that a sign is going out
I don't,
there.
actually,
Right.
if you wanted a notification requirement, I think that would be fine. But it's the asking permission requirement that I have a problem with. Because when you allow somebody to ask permission, they can literally say, you know what, I don't like that guy. Your answer's no. And that's discriminatory. And whether or not that's currently happening, that may happen 10 years from now. And that's actually going to put you in direct violation of state law.
So
That's where I see a major problem.
So the way that the current ordinance reads is unless authorized by the designee or the legislative body.
Right.
So if that authorization was better defined in that process so that it was not biased or discriminatory, then you would be better with that.
Yeah.
Is that what you're hearing?
That's exactly my
authorized-
concern. That's my concern, is that it will or can be used in a discriminatory manner.
Because I also heard you say you made a FOIA request and you did not see in there certain things that you would anticipate.
Right.
So it sounds like there's maybe gaps, if you might say, in terms of what the written requirements are for
them,
that.
yeah.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I understand, because like I said,
No,
it sounds
that's
like these are
good.
things, because whether we change this or not, that's still going to be an issue, it sounds like to you, that how it's enforced and how those other things. So we want to make the process better as much as we can in a recommendation to the
Sure.
council.
But, and that's why I think, that's why I like the current one, is that there is no ask permission, and everybody's allowed to put one out for at least 90 days. So there's no chance of saying you can and you can't. Everybody's playing on the same field. You can't selectively enforce 90 days, really. I mean, I suppose you could if you want to let somebody have a sign out for 2 years or something, but it's not as big of a deal. Nobody's told, no, you can't put one out. One of the examples I like to use is if, say, a town council member owns a business or has a buddy who owns a business. His buddy has permission to put signs all over town, but he denies all of the competitors. That would be not okay, correct? But that can be done under the way the ordinance is currently written. Right.
Because the authorization process is not well defined.
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yep, we are.
It would be best if the application process was simplified. Is that correct?
Right, and uniform. Yep.
Because the things that are in there, the size, the weight, the time durations, all those things would need to be spelled out and defined so that to give guidance to the town people who are enforcing it to say, how do I know? And that way, they'd be better, if this type of thing was done, all those requirements, they would need to have some guidance related to that.
Sure.
So, and how it gets, if it requires more time on their part, how does that get paid for to accommodate?
Right. Anything else?
Okay, I want to summarize.
Okay.
Stay there. Anybody else out there wants to make a comment, please? Okay, one of the things that we want clarified is an application process defined and where you ask permission, right? The authorization process needs to be defined. The enforcement policy, you don't think it's consistent. You think it's discriminatory. There's gaps in the written requirements. What else do we have?
I think that about sums it up.
You know, we had a modification to the amendment, you know, eliminating the elimination of the grassy areas and the medians. You know, the landscaped areas features, but is not limited to flower beds, planters, mossed areas, and then it had the except for grass areas, and we've eliminated the mode. So that they are still, I hate the term controlled, but we'll say regulated areas. And medians means along public thoroughfares and roadways. I'm not talking about the grassy strip in front of my sidewalk.
Mary, were you able to capture those bullet statements?
I was not able to capture your third one, please. I have authorization process needs to be defined. 2, enforcement is arbitrary or discriminatory. Number 3.
Mine,
No,
Oh.
David, yours was elimination of grassy areas in the landscaping.
okay.
Anybody? Okay. Do you get the consistency?
Consistent application process, was that the one?
Authorization process needs to be defined, so authorization or application. Authorization and application process need to be defined. 2, enforcement could be arbitrary or discriminatory. Not necessarily that it is, but just in the language.
Oh, I think you added the third point to the second. His third point was discrimination,
Okay.
right? Is that right?
Then we're good.
Application process defined. Gray area?
Gray area in the language.
Yes, or in the requirements. It says gray area in the written requirements.
In the written requirements. Thank you.
Any other board member have any other one they would like to add or delete one of these? Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you for typing all that up. I know that was a lot of words. And thank you all, seriously, for bringing this up. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. So I think what we've just discussed is, that's probably what we want to send to the town council, correct? Our recommendation would be clarify those items.
I think it would be better if we were to take and
Pardon?
to type up an amended to the amendments and get that to council.
I do have a question. Since they have given us a new ordinance to look at as the proposed changes, is it legally, are we legally bound to suggest changes in that, or are we just voting on whether we're going to recommend we pass that?
We're just gonna send that recommendation, I guess, that was discussed in the meeting, and I don't know, do we give an unfavorable or favorable? We just say,
Well, I think to Mark's point, that, you know, what we have provided to us that we're having in the public hearing is this written ordinance. However, at the same time, there are other issues that were raised, because this is the public hearing. There were other issues that were raised regarding, like I said before, whether it's the current ordinance or this ordinance, issues that you have raised that no matter which one of these, whether it's changed or not, these things need to be done in order to, for consistency of enforcement and for better clarity of the process of how this gets done. Because it sounds to me like it's not well defined what the process is.
so do we need to have them incorporate what we have talked about tonight in the amendment and get back to us?
I would say it is not our responsibility, I'm not an attorney, but I would say it is not our responsibility to rework the amendment unless given permission by the people who were involved.
No, we're not gonna rework it. We're just gonna give them these suggestions and it goes to town council.
Yeah,
no.
I think once you've got language down here that your petitioner is putting in front of you,
But
it's kind of black or white.
correct
But
me,
you can recommend to the town council that these amendments be considered with the following changes.
I think this came from the council. Wasn't it presented to the council and then referred to us for the public hearing?
Yes.
Our attorney, Beth Copeland, authored this.
But I think it was under the request of the town council.
Yes.
To come to us, because this is where the public hearing occurs,
take place.
is at the plan commission. So it came from the council to us to then give
Okay.
them our recommendation in one fashion or another back to the council after the public hearing. So it could be this plus, I think. and-
I think we could make a recommendation that this needs to be considered and
In our I think, again, Beth could give us better advisement, but I think we could make the recommendation that this needs to be changed
Right.
with the changes that Dave mentioned.
And these items
And these other
incorporated in
items
the
need to
amendment.
be incorporated or identified for us to be able to properly consider it as a part of the UDO, because it'll be incomplete if we add it to
Okay,
the
that's
UDO.
exactly what I was saying.
So, I mean, it comes wholly to us, and then we just say it needs to be adjusted in such a way, go back to the council and say, that's our return, back to you.
Yes.
And then you need to authorize changes to this, because this will still cause problems if we adopt this as it is in the UDO, because these other things aren't addressed in it.
The council consider the recommendations.
Correct.
For amendment to.
Right.
So then they can refer it back to us.
We're going to have to author those recommendations, aren't we? I'm sorry, not we. You.
The council would have to authorize somebody, the attorney, to do it, just like they did this. Because that's who sent this to us to look at.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, does that make sense to you? Because I am concerned that if we just take this as is, it doesn't address all those issues you raised.
And I can see that the UDO may not address all these issues. Do you guys agree now?
Yep.
Mark?
I agree, but I'm still on I wish we had an attorney here. The legal issue of the thing that was presenting to us tonight, whether we can suggest changes in that, I don't know.
Well, do we then say we do not agree with this and say no, but you have to look at
We would suggest
what we
that
suggested?
these be looked at.
But I think I think that is one option, is to say no.
What's
or no
another
recommendation.
option?
Well, I think another kind of going to what you said, Mark, is we could say that as it stands, we cannot recommend this without changes that we have recommended. So our recommendation is that you change this to address these issues and that we revisit it again. That we can't recommend it as it stands wholly because it doesn't address all the issues. So kind of saying, yes, this is codified and yes, this is it, yes or no, which is kind of what you were saying, which is a yes or no. But at the same time, it's not just, no, we don't want to do this. It's that we need the changes Dave mentioned, the changes you mentioned, all these things, and these things addressed that the public brought up, and that those need to be addressed. And I mean, we could sit here for hours and figure it out, but I really think we go back to the author, as you said, our attorney, and say, here are the things that were raised in the public hearing. Can you please address these in here and let the council then recommend it back to us once they're satisfied that it addresses these concerns?
Amen.
Does
And
that,
somebody could make a motion simply that we understand these issues and we wish to make a recommendation that we speak with council before making a recommendation to town council. Because the recommendation is to adopt or not to adopt the amendments. So.
well, and again, I would say,
Don't have any standing to make the recommendation of, making the recommendation to adopt with certain amendments. We have to go back to the attorney.
Yeah, granted. My concern, my biggest concern is I heard a lot of good comments from the public, and yet they don't seem like they're fully addressed in here. I'm afraid if we make changes, we're still going to have issues that have not yet been addressed in the UDO, and we're still going to have problems based on all the things that everybody brought up. And I would rather have it be right and take the time to do it right
Make it just
and make sure that we get all these things that are addressed, and maybe there are more things that are brought up in the future, but at least, you know, I would prefer to do it right.
I think we can send a recommendation to them that they need to look at this and revisit the amendment.
And they could watch the tape, or they could, it'd be nice if they were here, and then they could have heard all these comments too.
They might be watching on YouTube.
They might be. They might be.
So we just got two ways to vote tonight, favorable and
Well,
unfavorable?
or no recommendation.
No recommendation, okay.
But we could also add to that recommendation to say, the reason why we did is because of this. So, but whenever you're ready to call for a recommendation.
Well, I want everybody to be in concert with what we're doing. And I think that's fair. Because I think there's some things here that maybe need to be changed. Any other comment? So I'm ready for some type of motion. And I think we want to consider what we discussed as those bullet points that need to be addressed. So, do we have a motion?
Would it be appropriate to postpone taking action on this amendment as presented with the caveat?
We're not going to
Okay,
take.
then we're just, what are we taking action on then?
Pardon?
What are we approving or disapproving?
We're asking council to look at what has been addressed here tonight and incorporate it into this, so we have something that's more desirable.
Okay.
Comments from somebody else? Jeffrey?
Well, I guess what I would say is, I'll make a motion that we send this back with a recommendation that it be rewritten to address the concerns that were raised in this public hearing, because it's incomplete. And that we will then re-entertain the ordinance once it has been added to or amended to address the concerns brought out in tonight's public hearing.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Permit?
Can I maybe say,
Yes.
I appreciate the public's input in this.
Thank you.
And I apologize that the process is so slow, but at the same time, I would encourage you to stay engaged in it, both at the council level and at ours, and make sure that your input is continued to be heard, because it was very valuable tonight, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry. Second was
Dave.
Mr. Saville. Thank you.
And I did not see anybody who voted against that.
Permits and inspections, we don't know.
Did you get those from Mary, from Tim?
Yes, no, I did not.
Okay.
I do not get those from Tim.
Okay.
Unless Tammy passes them on to me.
Can she add to the minutes that those can be provided by Tim after the meeting, and then we can
Yes.
look at them in the minutes, since Tim was unable to be here? If you could just make a note that Tim was unable to be here, and that
Any new business? Any old business? motion to adjourn?
Mark? Is that a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Motion carries.
Robert, take the second on the adjournment. And we all agreed. All right, thank you very much again. Off the record, thank you very much too. And I'm sure we'll read about it in the
I
newspaper,
think
right?
there's some things that maybe addressed to make it a little clearer.
You'll have it in the newspaper, right?
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mary, I want to get with you and get those bullet statements, because I sort of scribbled them.
Thank you, sir.
I was talking. I think that's the only thing to do with it. Would you say no?
I mean, even if we don't change anything,
Hey, Mary, turn the mics off.
I'm sorry. Even if we don't change anything, it doesn't address our concerns. And if we do change something, it still doesn't. I mean, this doesn't talk about the two issues brought up here, which are enforcement and process.
Thank you, sir.
And if it needs to be a written process, then it needs to be a written process. Or a council member. I don't know. No, I don't think. No, but I'm sure she was watching it. Maybe. Or we'll watch it later. So, but the issues you raised, Dave, I mean, those need to be brought up in here. And, I think there's middle ground. I think there's willingness to find middle ground. We just have to. I mean, just because if the state and the county don't enforce it, doesn't mean, okay, we could drive 75 miles an hour down the road, and if they never enforce it, doesn't mean the speed limit is 75.
You drive 75 miles an hour down 67 till you cross the Mooresville town limit.
Yeah.
That's surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
So
The police car sitting there behind the billboard.
you're hiding and, so.
Well, and then, I don't know who has, if you're sitting on, if you're on a county line. True?
Consistency.
Yeah.
Consistency is key.
Well, and non-discrimination. All right. They even said that. They even said that. Yeah, it's on tape. And that's what I thought. I thought the council sent it to us via Beth, and she wrote it, but they had approached the council first. So.
What's in the UDO and what Beth had here tonight are legally sound. But it's new policy that we want to.
No, I agree.
Mary,
Yes, sir.
when will you have those little bullet statements that we had that they wanted to, I just scribbled them down sorta.
Okay, why don't you give me your scribbles? What I'm gonna do is I'm going to send this document to myself right now,
Okay,
and I will work with it over the computer. I will send it to you as well,
okay.
I think it was.
via email.
I think it was clear that not everybody who'd been dealt with by the town was happy with the way they'd been dealt with.
No.
So, and it hadn't been to us yet. So it must have been somebody else.
I think if we would have sent a recommendation not to change it, they'd be back again. What do you think?
No, I think they're gonna ask you, how in the hell are they gonna pay for this process?
Again, that's part of the process is, or you're saying how do they pay to do what we're asking them to
How are they
do?
gonna pay for clarity, how are they gonna pay for an application process? And how are they gonna pay for sign police?
Plus, you've got an office personnel that has to keep track of all this.
Exactly,
Danny said that.
exactly.
Danny said
Yeah.
that.
I know.
Well,
And so anybody who wants to put up a sign has to apply to the town of Morris, fill out an application, and get a sticker
But
from
you
the
know, but you
town
know what?
that says you can put out this sign from this to this.
Yeah.
Get a dated application. And then the sign police, I mean, we can hire teenagers to go around and pull down every sign that does not have an approved sticker on it.
I mean,
That's no big deal.
The-
But how are you gonna pay for it?
the
Time out.
the simplest way to do that is you have a fee.
Hey,
You charge a fee per
all they
sign.
have to do is
Nobody's
move their
gonna be talking
sign
about that.
back 3 or 4 feet on their property.
Well, that's the other thing is, I just put it on your property. and
That's
this
right, now
becomes an
put it
issue.
out in the,
This- this-
I asked him, how much would it?
Well, he said it himself, you know, you just do something that's fair to everybody. Well, the old ordinance is fair to everybody.
Well,
It's not allowed.
But at the same time, if I left in the morning and I had a really nice sign sitting in my yard and it disappeared while I was at work and I had no idea where it went, I'm not sure that is the right process.
That's not the right process.
And no note, no email, no phone call, no nothing. I'd go to my neighbors and they didn't, did it blow
What they
away?
should do is pick it up, put it in their yard
Yeah.
with a
And
notice.
Put a note on it, move the sign into their, that's what the process
Or-
is.
It takes less effort to do that than it does to load it in a truck.
Yes,
Take
yes,
it back to the
yes.
street department, unload it,
Yes.
take the phone call that it's gone, tell them to come back in here to pick it up, be there for them to pick it up.
Or just give the town employees a book of stickers
That's good.
that set, just like they do when they drive down the road and there's a car sitting on their
Yes,
shoulder. And it
yes.
says, you have 48 hours to move this or else we're gonna remove
Right.
it. And you know what happened to it because I told you what was gonna happen.
We've already got the way to, have a little sticker on it. You move the sign so they know you moved it. And if you put it back and don't call us, we're gonna take it. We don't want to though.
And I agree that they shouldn't say, well, your sign is okay, but your identical sign is not okay with no justification whatsoever. That's
Do
not a
they
good
have
process
proof of
either.
that?
Well, but I'm saying, that is not a
Then
good process.
What happens to all these yard sale signs and garage sale?
Can you take that off now
But-
if we stay away?
and I'm
Oh,
not-
I'm sorry.
It
Yeah,
muffles.
I had surgery recently, I'm
Yeah,
really
okay.
paranoid
Oh,
about it, but,
That's all right.
yeah, what happens to all those yard sale signs, those, lemonade stand signs?
If they put them back on their property,
There's no
But if-
problem, but they don't want to do that. You don't want to tell 5-year-olds, you have to put your lemonade stand sign on mommy and daddy's
I
property.
don't think
5
they're
feet
even
back.
gonna, I don't think they're gonna take a lemonade sign.
But if
But again, that's discrimination.
But if the perception,
Yeah.
that's the problem is, if the
That's
perception is that I don't understand the process other than you like me and you don't like me, that means the process is not well understood by somebody. Because either it is discriminatory, which means it shouldn't be that way, or it's not and the people don't understand it. It's one of the two. So, but you're right, I mean, it shouldn't be considered biased or discriminatory, especially if it's, well, all Republicans get this and all Democrats get this, that's not good.
You shouldn't ask permission to put the sign up, because that could discriminate. You ask to put the sign up and get a permit to put the sign up. You're not asking, all you
Well,
need-
then it's documented. And if it's documented discrimination, then that's gonna be a problem. So,
No, everybody.
but that's what I
gets-
mean, that's what, exactly what I mean. I
everybody
mean,
gets the sign.
authorized, just because it's authorized does not mean that it's permission is asked for and all that. It has to be, process has to be delineated. Because right now, it sounds to me like it's not written down, that nothing is done, it's all verbal, and that creates all kinds of problems when you do FOIA requests and stuff like that. I mean, good grief, we have how many different how many different processes for everything else? Why could we not have one for this?
The thing that bothers me the most is that we have asked for input from the street department, and neither one of them have offered any input at all.
Well, the biggest concern I have is a sign by definition is to draw your attention to something. And it's distracting you from what you're supposed to be doing in the middle of the road, which is keeping your eye on the traffic in front of you, which is why I think the state and the county do what they do, is to say, look, if you put it on your private property, there's really not much I can do about that, and unless it becomes a huge distraction and those sorts of things. But, so they have latitude in there. And I'm sorry, just because the county and the state don't police it doesn't mean it's right.
Can
So-
we get the
Well, that's true.
Westfield's, UDO?
Mhm.
to be
Yeah,
on
it's
it?
out on the website, and I'm sure our attorney can get us that too.
Well, I think that I've got on it before, because, we were gonna do that interacting, right,
Mhm.
Mary?
Oh, yeah.
And we could see what, and the.
Yeah.
Jeff
And we could
Manning
see-
said Plainfield says you can't put it. in
I would say, we
public
can see what
right-of-way.
Plainfield says, what Avon says, what Martinsville says, what Monrovia says. We can see what all the surrounding areas are because somebody, I mean, that one woman who is the campaign person who, I mean, she lives in the county. This doesn't affect her. I mean, it's my house. If I put a sign,
It affects her candidate.
it affects her candidates, but I don't, Mike and I don't live in the town. We're the county buffer representatives.
that's-
So if I put a sign in my yard, this
I
won't
don't
affect it.
understand it.
And it won't
If-
affect
if-
hers either.
if it's okay-
So I
if
just
it's not
wanted
okay
her to
here,
understand that
and
she
2
hasn't
feet
approached
to
the
here
people
is
who are
okay.
where she is.
So
I understand
move it 2
she's
feet
concerned
right.
about what goes on in the town, but, you know,
I
if,
swear to God, that's
if,
a
if,
legal.
you know, Dave Sadler lives across the street, in the subdivision across the street from me. So what he can do in his yard is different than what I can do in my yard
Right.
because of the, but he may not know that.
But he chose that. Both of you chose to
Right.
buy within that
But-
subdivision, that's the thing.
But
Well, she signed
as
up
much
on
as
the sign-up
possible,
sheet?
we want to be uniform between our ordinances,
Oh.
so it's consistent between the two. Because otherwise, it's like, well, how come you can do this and I can't do that, and it just creates confusion. So, I mean, where you live is in the county.
Right.
So the county
Right outside
dictates
the
what goes on, for the most part. Not
I don't
everything,
remember
but for
from
the most
mine,
part.
I remember seeing somebody in a Indian shirt.
So,
I think this has now brought up a lot more questions about enforcement.
yeah,
And, I'm sorry, tactics rather than actual law.
well, and the process, how do you do what you do?
I don't know what the attorney would have done here tonight.
So, well, actually, it's better she wasn't here since she was the author of this. We can refer it back to council, who can then direct her as to what she's supposed to do. Because that's who it came from.
We can't direct her.
Well, we can, but, I mean, through,
And that
the
was
council's the
why I
one that
asked
sent
my
this to us.
question.
I send it back and
Isn't
say,
it
you know
our
what, we need your help, because this
job
isn't, we
tonight
can't do this
just
yet.
This is,
And
I
then-
mean, this is the ridiculous thing.
however they get
is
done.
Was
This was
presented to us.
what came out tonight was exactly what I was trying to explain. We cannot say, we cannot give a recommendation to town council. We have to simply refer it back to them and say, we make
Since
no
it's a-
recommendation
was on
until
public
this is
notice.
incorporated.
Right, well,
But it is neither of our bodies' purview to make those changes. So
Well-
this keeps being booted back and forth forever.
well, but they sent us this very specific change that they wanted to have done. And our task was yes or no. Well, yes or no is not the complete answer back
Right,
to them.
exactly.
And so the answer is, I would like for you to change this so I can say yes. Because these issues are not addressed in this that you gave me.
Yeah, again, it's kicking it back and forth between the two bodies until we just sit down and meet with the attorney and figure it all out.
Well, but it shouldn't be too many times, because it's just like at this, between the Senate and the House, in that reconciliation does occur fairly quickly, because we had a public hearing, because
Yeah, but
that's where we have it.
reconciliation
And so,
occurs-
between us and the public,
Right, reconciliation occurs between the vote on the
but the
bill.
people who were here voiced their concerns, and we wrote them all down, and you did. And we have our concerns, and we wrote them all down. So in theory, we send that back to the council, they have all of our concerns. If they address all of our concerns, we can say yes.
I think,
Yeah.
I think this list.
If they do,
Danny
if they do. If they don't, what happens? It goes
Well,
back.
if they don't, then we say no.
It goes back and forth, yeah.
Well, we can say no, except, but we can also make a recommendation, which is what you just said, is address these specific concerns, and then we would like to sit down with you before you send it back to us and make sure that it's right.
Yeah.
We can do that too.
That's probably a better idea.
We can do that too. And
Well,
the attorney's the same
Out
for
of all
both, so
those
that
emails
also.
we got, how many do you think, percentage-wise, showed up versus all the emails that we got? Well, they won't be sending me emails again because I deleted that account.
Oh, okay, well, I guess they won't be sending those.
You should see that email in your inbox. It just has that document attached to it. And, sorry,
You're sending it to me tonight or tomorrow?
I just sent it to you now.
Okay, oh, okay.
So you should see it in your inbox, and it has, my notes as fast as I can scribble. I will go ahead and sit down. I think I should be able to do it tomorrow morning.
No, just the next day or two.
And my son's a bum, so.
Well, the council won't see it for a while.
I've got some scribbles there, and what you've got and I've got
Well,
And their main, the main concern of the people who are here is the primary and the election, which isn't until November and May. So we have time to get this figured out in a couple of weeks or a month or so, so it's
Do you think it's unreasonable for them to move the sign back 2 feet onto their property?
No, I don't. I think it's just so simple. And I think landscaping your mailbox is ridiculous as well, but, that's my.
Well, that just be kind sign is everywhere, and people really get ticked off if you take their just be kind sign, because you're not being kind.
Because you're not being kind.
Well, and the two things I heard that really upset people was, you took it and you didn't tell me. And I think you're letting somebody else do something that you won't let me do.
Well-
And it's discriminatory.
Just like the downtown sandwich board signs for restaurants.
Yeah, I can, those are really benefiting the public when you go to a restaurant and you see what they got, what the special is.
But is it right for Ralph and Avis to have one that Zydeco's can't have one because I like Ralph and Avis better than Zydeco's, which is what I heard them saying.
Well, no, but that's, I mean,
And, just because,
I think the discrimination comes in even if the restaurant should not have signboards if you don't allow me to have a signboard in the easement. I think our sign in the easement was the thing.
But-
That was the discrimination.
but if the process is written down, they come in and talk to Dave, Dave says, no, you can't do it because I'm having a bad day, and I say no. Then Dave's on vacation and I come in and see Tim, and Tim says, sure, why not? I don't see a problem with it. And it suddenly
Well,
looks like I let one do it.
That's
and the
why I
other
think the old ordinance is the best, because all you have to do is just say no to everybody.
I like
It is
that.
simple.
Yeah.
It is simple.
No way.
Say no and put your sign on your property. Now,
So we
Say no to everybody.
where does Ralph and Avis? their
Property starting in
property
at the
is on
building,
sidewalk?
at the
They
building,
own
at
any
the edge of the building,
sidewalk?
probably.
No,
I'll bet
they
there's,
don't own the
I'll bet
sign.
it starts right at the edge of the building.
No. So you
And then they'll
can't,
come to BZA and not need a variance.
So what if they put a post,
Off the side of the building?
Pipe coming out and it's sticking out here, but it's not on the, you can have it, or you can have it in your window.
It really frosts Danny Lindy that the park has that
I
signboard
can
out
tell
there.
that, I can tell that.
But I still say I've got the remedy to that. The town donate that land, that little wedge.
park.
To the park. So it's actually
But
park
it's-
property.
But it's still the government's property, and the park ought to be able to put the,
all the park has to do is ask.
But this goes back even more.
They've already voted
Is-
that they didn't have to ask.
Is
Do it.
that a safety hazard or not by it being out there?
No, because it's back far enough to where, well, as far as being able to see around it, it's not a safety issue.
Well, no,
but
does it
to
draw
read
my
it-
attention as I'm driving by and I hit the guy in front
you
of me?
know
To
what we're
read the-
talking about, that little triangle, that the political signs filled it, that election time.
Because our overall
You
size.
still have a camera on.
No, it's buffering, that's the problem.
The,
I can't shut it down.
our sign ordinance specifically addresses motion signs, meaning videos and things like that, because those are considered to be traffic hazard distractions.
And we let the
And
snow
yet
have
we
one.
have hundreds of signs around town that are that way. The libraries are all that way, the schools are all that way, the churches are all that way. They all have signs like
Park
that.
has got one.
The one church around the corner from me has full motion video on there of their service, of their worship service on there.
How did they allow billboards on this highway?
The same thing. Pacer game update on the billboard down there by Meadow
Every
Lakes.
time you go to Indianapolis,
Yeah.
you look at that.
And so I'm watching it because I want to see what the Pacer score is, and